Have you ever had a close call? Like a real close call? A moment in life that left you saying, wow, that was almost a wrap for me. Those moments will rattle you and stick with you for the rest of your life. But they also make you appreciate life more. Well, today, we have the top 10 craziest near-death experiences for you. Some might even make you never want to leave your house again. Let's dive in. Kicking off today's video with the near-death experience of Tracy Morgan. This famous comedian and actor had a terrifying near-death experience in 2014 when a tractor trailer crashed into the minibus he was in, causing a devastating multi-car pileup. The accident killed his friend and fellow comedian James McNair. Morgan narrowly avoided instant death, but was rushed to the hospital with life-threatening brain injuries, as well as shattered legs and ribs. His life was hanging by a thread, and he was placed in a medically induced coma for a week. When he woke up, he could barely speak and was blind for 6 days. During his recovery, he often struggled with thoughts of suicide and described being in a very dark place for a long time. However, during an emotional interview with Oprah Winfrey, Morgan shared details about going to the other side and reuniting with his father, who died in 1987 at the age of 39. He was wearing a green thing and said, "I'm not ready for you, son," Morgan said. "I started crying so hard," Tracy added, "probably harder than I cried at his funeral, and I just kept saying, 'Dad,' because he was my friend for life." When asked by Winfrey on Super Soul Sunday if a person can ever be normal again after a near-death experience, Morgan answered, "No, I told my wife that the other day. Something's different, the way I am with people. I find myself saying, 'I love you' 200 times a day to strangers. I don't care. I don't have to know you to love you. That's how we're supposed to be as human beings. We're supposed to take care of each other." Often in tears during the interview, the actor said he truly believed he was in heaven and that his late father, who died when Tracy was just 19, encouraged him to return to the living world. Morgan did see a massive change in his life and the way he viewed people. Was it because of the experience he had meeting his dead father? We never know. But moving on, next, we have the case of Dr. Mary Nee. In 1999, Mary Neal, an American surgeon, was kayaking in Chile when her boat crashed over a waterfall and pinned her against some rocks. She was completely submerged, about 10 feet underwater, and as she started to drown, she had a religious experience where she was greeted by spirits who gave her an overwhelming sense of love. She then saw her own body being pulled ashore and given CPR. Eventually, she was revived. During this time, she said God told her that her 9-year-old son, Willie, would die one day, but didn't say how. 10 years later, at the age of 19, he was tragically killed in a car accident. That has to be one of the most terrifying near-death experiences, knowing that you're about to lose your child one day, but the next case is of a man who cried and pleaded with God to give him a second chance at life. George Foreman. The businessman and former boxing champion had a near-death experience after a boxing bout in 1977. The fight had gone 12 rounds, and after returning to his dressing room, Foreman collapsed from heat exhaustion. He heard a voice say, "You believe in God. Why are you afraid to die?" Suddenly, his life flashed before his eyes like a fast-forwarded video. He knew he was about to die. Desperate, he cried out to God, offering to give away all his money to the poor in exchange for his life. The voice responded, "I don't want your money, I want you." Foreman later described the place he was in as a dark void, completely absent of love, light, or happiness. He called it a dump yard of nothing and sorrow. He also said that he felt like someone had dropped in a sea where there was no land for miles around. Feeling scared, Foreman cried out loud, "I still believe there's a God." That's when he felt a hand reach out and pull him out of nothing and death. Foreman would later release a biopic titled Biopic: Big George Foreman, where he shares details about his near-death experience. Next on the list, we have the near-death experience of Elizabeth Taylor. The legendary British-American actress had a near-death experience while undergoing back surgery in the late 1950s. During the operation, She technically died on the table as 11 medical staff tried to revive her. She recalled seeing a tunnel and a bright white light. In the tunnel, she saw her late husband, Michael Todd. She told him, "Oh, Mike, you're where I want to be." But he replied, "No, baby, you have to turn around and go back. There is something very important for you to do. You cannot give up now." It was his words that pulled her back from the brink of death. Next on the list, we have the case of Colton Burpo. In 2003, a 3-year-old boy named Colton had a near-death experience during emergency surgery. After recovering, he told his parents that he had been to heaven. He described seeing doctors operating on him and his father, praying in the waiting room. He then began sharing details that he couldn't possibly have known, such as the existence of his unborn sister, whom his mother had miscarried years before. He also described his great-grandfather, who had died 24 years before Colton was even born. Colton even claimed he met Jesus, who was riding a rainbow-colored horse. His story became a best-selling book and a movie that grossed over $100 million. But moving on next, we have the near-death experience of a woman, and her case has to be one of the biggest miracles that even doctors seemed puzzled about. In 2006, Anita Morjani was dying of cancer. Her weight had dropped to just 85 pounds, and she had massive, inoperable tumours. She eventually died, but at that moment, she said she crossed over into the afterlife. She described feeling an incredible sense of peace and love. She met her father, who told her that if she went any further, she would not be able to return. The place she was in was so beautiful, she didn't want to leave. However, she had a moment of clarity. If she returned to her body, she knew her cancer would heal. Sure enough, when she came back, her tumours shrank by 70% in just 4 days. Doctors were stunned, but Anita said she knew it simply wasn't her time to die. But moving on is the unfortunate case of a man who didn't survive his illness yet. He had one of the most unusual near-death experiences before his death. In 2011, 18-year-old Ben Breedlove posted a YouTube video called "This Is My Story." He described his lifelong heart condition, which once required surgery. During that time, he recalled being in a white, endless room with his favorite rapper, Kid Cudi. They both wore white suits, and when Ben looked at himself in the mirror, he felt completely at peace. Tragically, just 1 week after posting the video, on Christmas Day 2011, Ben had a heart attack and passed away. His story spread worldwide, and Kid Cudi later said he broke down and cried when he heard about it. But next up on the list, we have the case of Ian McCormick, who rediscovered his faith after he nearly died. In 1982, Ian McCormick was diving for lobsters off the coast of Mauritius when he was stung by 5-box jellyfish, one of the deadliest creatures in the world. Within minutes, he was completely paralyzed. As he was being rushed to the hospital, he saw his life flash before his eyes. He had a vision of his mother praying for him, telling him to call out to God for forgiveness. Despite the doctor's efforts, Ian was pronounced dead for 15 minutes. During this time, he described being in a long, dark tunnel. Suddenly, a warm light appeared at the end, and he felt an overwhelming sense of love. A voice asked him if he wanted to return to his body. He said yes. Before coming back, he was shown a Bible passage that he had never heard before. When he woke up, he immediately checked the Bible, and to his shock, it was real. But finally on the list, we have the case of Gary Busey. This Hollywood actor has had several brushes with death, but his worst was a motorcycle crash in 1988. He was riding without a helmet when he was thrown over his handlebars, smashing his head onto the curb. His skull split open, leaving a massive hole. During emergency surgery, he died on the operating table. Busey later said he found himself in another realm, surrounded by floating balls of light. 3 of them approached him, and he realized he no longer had a physical body or gender. The lights told him he had been doing good in his life and could either stay with them or return to his body to fulfill his destiny. He chose to return and later said he believed the lights were angels. After this experience, he dedicated his life to Jesus. So, what do you think? Are these proof of an afterlife, or just tricks played by a dying brain? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.